We had been dreaming about this moment for years, our first home. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a modest two-story house tucked away on a quiet suburban street. The kind of place where neighbors waved hello and kids rode bikes until sunset. It felt perfect. The first few days were filled with excitement, unpacking boxes, painting walls, and imagining the memories we'd make. It wasn't until the third night that things started to feel off. It began with the noises. At first, I brushed them off. Old houses creak, I told myself. It's probably just settling. But as I lay in bed, I couldn't ignore the distinct sound of footsteps coming from the attic. I woke Mark up, but by the time he was fully alert, the noise had stopped. Probably squirrels, he mumbled before rolling over and falling back asleep. But I wasn't convinced. The next morning, I found the attic hatch slightly ajar. Mark insisted it had always been that way, but I was sure we had closed it when we first moved in. I shut it tight and tried to push the thought out of my mind. That was just the beginning. One night, as I was unpacking boxes in the living room, I heard faint whispers. At first, I thought it was the TV, but it was off. The whispers seemed to come from the vents, soft and indecipherable. I called Mark, but by the time he came downstairs, the sound had vanished. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up at odd hours, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. The house felt different, heavier somehow. I started avoiding certain rooms, especially the attic. I couldn't even bring myself to go near it. Then we found photographs. We were cleaning out the basement when Mark came across a dusty shoebox. Inside were black and white pictures of a family, a man, a woman, and 2 kids. They looked happy enough, except for one thing. In every single photo, the man's face was scratched out. Weird, Mark said, flipping through them. Probably just old tenants. But something about those photos made my skin crawl. I wanted to throw them out, but Mark said we should hold on to them just in case. That night, the whispers returned, louder this time. They seemed to echo from the vents, growing into faint cries. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. We called a locksmith the next morning to check all the locks. While he was working, he asked casually, "You know about this place, right?" "What do you mean?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "Couple that lived here before you. Husband went missing. Wife said he just vanished one night. They never found him." I felt the blood drain from my face. Mark brushed it off, but I couldn't. The whispers, the attic, the photos, it all fit. That night, I heard the attic hatch creak open. I woke Mark and begged him to check. He grabbed a flashlight and climbed up the ladder. I waited at the bottom, my heart pounding. Then I heard him scream. He came down pale and shaking, holding one of the scratched-out photos. "It's him," he whispered. "Who?" I asked. "The man in the pictures, he's up there." We left the house that night and never went back. We didn't take anything, not even our clothes. We sold it as fast as we could, but I still can't sleep without hearing those whispers. I don't know what or who was in that attic, and I don't want to know. Always dreamed of living in this neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, charming old houses, and that perfect mix of quiet and community. When I finally found a small fixer-upper for sale, I jumped on it. It felt like fate. The first few weeks were great. I spent my evenings unpacking, decorating, and waving at neighbors as they walked their dogs. Everyone seemed friendly, especially the guy next door, Jerry. He was older, maybe in his 50s, and always out in his yard tending to his roses. At first, he just seemed quirky. He'd wave every time he saw me, even if I'd just gone inside and come back out. Once, I caught him staring at me from his porch, but he quickly looked away. I brushed it off. New neighbors can be nosy, right? One night, I was out back fixing a broken fence panel when I heard a noise, like someone breathing. I turned, but no one was there, just the dark yard and Jerry's house beyond it. I laughed at myself and went inside. The next morning, I found footprints in the dirt near my fence. Bare feet, too big to be a kid's. I told myself it had to be Jerry checking out my repairs. Still, it unsettled me. A few nights later, I woke up to a tapping sound. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. I got out of bed and peered out the window. Jerry was standing in my yard. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there looking up at my window. My stomach dropped. I wanted to yell, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I backed away and called the police. By the time they arrived, Jerry was gone. The officers were polite but clearly skeptical. No crime had been committed, after all. The next day, Jerry was out trimming his roses like nothing had happened. He waved. I didn't wave back. That night, I locked all the doors and windows. I double-checked them. But at 3 a.m., I woke up again. This time, it was the sound of creaking wood. Someone was inside. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the noise. The living room was dark, but I could see the outline of someone standing by the window. Jerry, I flipped on the light, and he bolted, crashing through the front door and disappearing into the night. The police took it more seriously this time, but Jerry claimed he was sleepwalking and didn't remember a thing. I don't sleep well anymore. Every creak, every shadow feels like a threat. I changed the locks, put up cameras, and adopted a dog. But sometimes, late at night, I'll see a figure on the sidewalk, just out of reach of the camera's view, standing watching. When I first stepped into my new home, I couldn't believe it was mine. Fresh out of college, with a great job lined up that offered stellar pay and benefits, everything felt like it was falling into place. The house was in the same town where I'd spent 4 years studying, so I was familiar with the area. It felt like the perfect fresh start. Just me, my dream job, and my new home. At my mom's insistence, I adopted a dog for protection. Scout was a lovable golden retriever mix with a big bark and an even bigger heart. He followed me around the house, his tail wagging as he explored every room like he knew this was his new job, to keep me safe. For the first few days, everything was great. I settled into my routines, unpacking boxes and decorating the house. But then I started noticing him, a man in his late 40s or early 50s who lived in the house across the street. At first, I thought he was just being friendly. He'd wave when I got home from work or when I took Scout out for walks. I'd wave back, thinking nothing of it. But soon it became clear that his attention wasn't normal. Every time I left the house, whether to go to work, grab groceries, or take Scout to the park, he was there, watching. His eyes followed me from his porch, his car, or even the corner of his yard. At first, I told myself it was just a coincidence, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One evening, as I returned home with Scout after a walk, I caught him standing at the edge of his property, staring. He didn't wave this time. He just stood there, motionless, as Scout's bark echoed in the quiet street. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me. That night, I ordered security cameras online and installed them around the house, covering the front door, back patio, and every inch of the perimeter. For the first time since moving in, I slept with all the lights on. It didn't take long for the cameras to confirm my worst fears. Footage from the second night showed him standing at the edge of my driveway around midnight, just staring at my house. Scout, in his bed near the front window, hadn't made a sound. My blood ran cold as I watched the footage. How long had he been doing this before I noticed? The next morning, I called my older brother. Without hesitation, he packed a bag and moved into the guest room. Having him there made me feel safer, and almost immediately, the neighbor's behavior changed. He stopped lingering near my house, and I didn't catch him on the security cameras anymore. But I still felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the image of him standing there in the dark, watching. My brother's presence brought some comfort, but I've learned to trust my instincts. I'm keeping the cameras, the locks are getting upgraded, and Scout sleeps in my room every night now. I'm trying to move on, but every time I leave the house, I can't help but glance toward his yard. He's not always there, but sometimes, just sometimes, I catch him peeking out from behind his curtains. I don't know what he's thinking or what his intentions were or still are, but one thing is for sure, I'll never let my guard down again.